And in the first part of the farewell discourse, I'll call it part A, chapters 13 and 14, before the pivot on the vine, we have the dramatic pronouncement that involves the theme of glorification, right? The theme of glorification is all over the place here. Glorification is happening now. And in case you weren't aware of it, it's happening now when Jesus gives the command to love, which he says is a new command. Is it new? No, it's there in the Old Testament. Love your neighbor as yourself. What's new here is love as I am showing you how to love, right? As I've showed you in the hupodeigma that I've just given you, and as I will show you in the ultimate hupodeigma on the cross. Love in that way is what Jesus, I think, is saying in John's version of the love command. So the first round of the Last Supper, or the farewell discourse, talks about Jesus' departure and his promised return to abide in and with his disciples, and his promise of an advocate or paraclete. So let's look at that and go into it just a little bit more in detail. At the beginning of chapter 14, Jesus says he's going away to prepare abodes for the disciples. Monai is the word, which is related to the Greek word for remaining or staying, meno, which is the verbal form. And that's not accidental. We saw the beginning of this play back in chapter 1 and heard it a couple of other times along the way, and here it is in spades. It's all about abiding. But there may be some allusion to contemporary architecture too. This was a period when apartment buildings were being built, and multiple unit dwellings were all over the place. And so there may be an allusion to that. In my father's big condo building, there are lots of good condos where you can co-domain, you could live together. Jesus says he's going to return. When? There are all sorts of predictions about the return of Jesus in the Synoptic Gospels. The eschatological discourse of Mark 13, which we talked about in thinking about the Son of Man, has one of those, right? John goes on and says that there's indwelling taking place already, the Father in me and I in him. And so I do what I do because of that relationship that I have with the Father. Note that what we have forming here is yet another chiastic structure, another framing of things. Jesus says in 4:12, I'm leaving, I'm going. And then in 4:15, if you love me, keep my commandments. This, in fact, is the condition for abiding. This is how abiding takes place, by hearing and obeying that command. Jesus, having said that he's going, says, but I'm not leaving you orphans, and I will come, repeating things again. There's a lot of repetition in this Last Supper discourse. He's coming back. How? As the Messiah at the end of time? No, he never quite says that, does he? Is he coming back as the paraclete? Maybe, or maybe he's coming in some other way. He reaffirms, as he had already said, that he's in the Father, and that you, disciples, are in me and I'm in you. So there's a mutual indwelling. What does it mean? There's a relationship that has been established by his coming into the world, by his engaging with people in this way, and by leaving this command that they love one another as he has loved them. And to make this quite clear, he says, keep my word. And then we, the Father and I, will abide in you. The relationship depends upon your acceptance of this revelation and this willingness to keep this command. The notion that Jesus is somehow abiding in the hearts and minds of people who accept his teaching is not new. We have that in a slightly different form in Paul. In Galatians 2, I live now, not I, but Christ lives in me. So John is not inventing something. He's given a new narrative expression to something that was there on the lips of many early Christian teachers. So Jesus says, I will go and will come again. How? In the life of disciples. John, in other words, adapts eschatological hope, which comes to be realized now in the relationship that people have to God through Christ, through the example that they follow. Briefly on the paraclete, we have, and then I think I'm going to call a halt to it there and take some questions. Might pick up on the final prayer of Jesus next time. We have these two versions of a reference to the paraclete. Jesus says in chapter 14, verse 16, I'll send another advocate. Parakletos means called to one side, advocatus, called in. And like advocate, paraclete is a legal technical term for someone who was called in as a legal advisor or an advisor who provides other kinds of advice or consolation. Jesus says this is the Spirit of truth. So we're not talking about some other human being. We're talking about the pneuma, the Spirit. And what he will do will be to teach and remind. And what we have here, I think, is quite clearly just an interpretation of early Christian teaching on the Spirit that's a presence in the community. More prominent in John than in the Synoptics, extremely important in Paul, where Christ, the new Adam, is the Spirit, or where the Lord is the Spirit in 2 Corinthians, and quite prominent too in Luke, both in the Gospel and particularly in Acts, where the Spirit is in fact an actor, a player in the drama, who moves things along and determines how things are going to go. So the personification of the Spirit of God, which is an Old Testament term widely used for God's presence and power in the world, the personification of that notion is something that's been there. It's in early Christian language, and John uses it here, labeling it the paraclete. The paraclete part 2 comes up in chapter 15. Again, the Spirit of truth, picking up the language of verse 14, who bears witness. We have new functions accorded to the Spirit, picking up themes that are prominent in John, and bearing witness is one of those. And the Spirit also has judgmental themes. So the legal dimensions of paraclete language come to bear in John 16:8, because the paraclete will convict the world as a prophetic judge. This is an edgier version, if you will, of the paraclete than what we had earlier on. And he's also a teacher who will teach in all truth. So what does the paraclete do? The paraclete does the things that the Spirit was supposed to do in all of these other texts. He teaches, he leads, he provides inspiration for prophecy that involves judgment on the contemporary scene. And here, Jesus is in some ways an intermediary between the Father and the Spirit, but they're all somehow united. There's, if you will, kind of proto-Trinitarian doctrine going on here, but nothing quite like proto-Trinitarian, not like Trinitarian doctrine of late antiquity.